I had to be very careful. They say a lot of people in Arizona who get MS have to move because this heat is very, very dangerous. Heat's a very bad one. I got MS, and a couple years later, I was hiking the Grand Canyon, and I was at the bottom. Crazy. Yeah, and it was like one of those things. I was like, this could be certain death down here for people like me. I don't care. I'm healthy-ish. I'm going to live my life. This is what I'm going to do. And it was also very reckless. Again, I don't advocate for this, but I do remember one moment at the bottom. There's a place called, they call it the Hot Box.
Welcome back to the show. There's no telling where we'll go. So come and share a laugh on the Imp and Skizz podcast.
All right, Skizz, something not super well known. I know that you've told people about this, but I don't know that you're super outspoken about it. Was many years ago, actually quite a young age for this condition, you were diagnosed with MS.
Right.
And it's not something you talk about a lot, but it's not something you've hidden from the public. And we got to talking the other day, and we just kind of like, sometimes it affects you in different ways.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And we thought, you know what? Might be a good time to talk about it, because you're obviously not the only person on the planet with MS or been diagnosed with something that could hold you back or cause you to have to deal with the world in a different way. And it could be good to talk through some of this stuff. And just, I want to know, personally, I want to know more about it and how it affects you and what you're able to do to manage it and things like that. So if you're willing, I know this is going to be a bit of a vulnerable kind of a podcast. But if you're willing to talk about it, I think it would be good for people to understand a little bit more about you and what you've had to go through with the condition.
Yeah.
And what your thoughts are on what might be the future for you.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think that everybody watching or listening, I think there's a good portion of them. They're like, yeah, I did know this. And then for some of them, this is brand new information that would probably hit them like a Mack truck. I have talked about it before. It's not anything that I feel, you use the word vulnerable. I understand why you're using that word. I don't think I feel necessarily vulnerable. However, I do understand how it could be a vulnerable thing. I also, and we'll get more into some of the details of what this is, but I think that for the people who had just hit like a Mack truck, this is not going to be a bleak podcast. This is actually going to be more information based. And the first time I actually gave it, okay, so here's the deal. The first time I ever said it to the public, and it wasn't like I was hiding something, but it was one of those like, when you have a condition like this, then when people see you, they think that's the guy with MS, not that Skizz, or that's not that funny guy. That's the guy with MS. You didn't
want a label,
right? It's just the way it is, and that's okay. It's normal human behavior to do that. And I remember I was, as just sort of a small story of this, I was out to dinner with my brother and a group of his friends. This was many years ago, and I don't quite remember how it came out, but somebody had talked about some kind of disease or whatever. And he said, well, my brother's got MS. And they're like, do you? And I'm like, yeah. And then we talked about it for whatever. And then as the night went on, my brother and I were driving home, and he said, hey man, I guess I disclosed something about him. I don't quite remember. He goes, and he was cool about it. He's like, don't tell people this or whatever. I'm like, okay, well, as long as we're on that subject, don't just volunteer that I have MS to total strangers to me. And he goes, oh, no, I thought that was, no, you're right. I'm very sorry. Like, he was like, I didn't even think about it. And I'm like, and I said, it's not like I'm ashamed of it, but the bottom line is I'm no longer your brother. I'm that guy with MS. That's just the way the human mind works. And that's okay. And so that's why I kept it relatively secret, if you will, not deliberately so, but I had to come clean because you and I were on a pretty stellar schedule with Naked and Scared, a show we used to do on Minecraft called Naked and Scared. I hate to use the word used to because I still hope we do it again. It's just been many years. But anyways, we were on a pretty consistent schedule, and it dropped off because I had a massive relapse, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. And so I had to miss a lot of this stuff, right? So for anybody who's unfamiliar with what MS is, it stands for multiple sclerosis. And in a nutshell, essentially your defenses in your body, right? The blood cells that attack what it deems as foreign objects and stuff. Well, once upon a time, the defense system and the neurological system got along, and then one day your defenses built up some amnesia to the fact that your neurological system is still part of your body, and it starts attacking it. It's a weird thing. And it's a very frustrating disease to have because all the advances that have been done in different types of meds to try to keep it at bay. To this day, it's uncurable. To this day, there's still. I don't even know if there's a hypothesis as to how this comes along. It's not hereditary. It doesn't seem to be environmental. There's just so little known about it, and that's frustrating. That's probably the most frustrating part is that, like, what are we doing? What is this thing?
But for the most part, I mean, like I'm your best friend. I spend a lot of time with you, and I forget all the time.
Yeah.
Like it's not on the forefront of my mind because I don't see a lot happening.
That's correct. I'm very
with you,
lucky.
other than like when you had your flare up, and I knew that like. I mean, there was a moment there where you weren't sure if you could ever use a keyboard and mouse again, which put your career
at risk.
At risk. But like for the most part, there's no symptoms really shown unless you have that kind of relapse. So I never really think about it. But there are some quirks of it that we can maybe talk about it. But let's go back because you found out about this at like what's known as a super young age to be getting diagnosed
25,
with MS. You were 25 years old.
Yeah.
How did you find out? Like what?
It's crazy.
How
actually.
did you be like, oh, something's wrong with me? What was the first symptom?
Yeah. So the first symptoms I started to feel were in my fingertips, and it was interesting. You and I were working a job at tech support. Think of where we were working in our mid-20s. We had just graduated college. And I remember, in the best way I could explain it is all of a sudden it hurt to type, and I didn't understand why. And when I went to explain it to the doctor, and I said, imagine if you had a pot of rolling, boiling hot water, like the bubbles are active because that water's cooking, and you stick your finger in it for a second. It's hot for a second, but then it's instantly not hot. That's how every key press felt to me. So when I was typing, it was like I was typing over a vat of hot, boiling water. And I remember being like, God, I'm trying to work here. You know what I mean? But every single key press I was like that. And I just sort of, I don't know, got used to it. I didn't really think too much on it. And then I started to have this really interesting thing to where when I would look down, my chest felt like somebody was pouring a bucket of sand on it whenever I looked down. And I would also feel it over the top of my head. And I didn't, and none of that was like cripplingly painful. Not by a long shot. It was just weird, man. It was super weird. And so what I thought it was I thought it was an old gymnastics injury when I almost broke my neck doing some tumbling work when I was a kid. And so I went to the doctor and I told him what I was feeling. And I told him my hypothesis. And I said, I feel like it's an old injury that I have on my neck because I almost broke my neck when I was a gymnast. And he's like, he goes, well, it doesn't really sound like it'd be related, but it could be. Maybe there's scar tissue pushing on your spine or something. Let's go ahead and let's get an MRI. And so I get the MRI of my neck, and he calls me either that day or the next day when he looked at the results, and he said, I need you to come back in. I want to MRI your brain. I'm all, well, that can't be good. You know what I mean? I'm like, that sounds bad. And so I was like, okay, so now I'm like trying to prepare for what this could be. And just, I had no idea. I was kind of thinking he wanted to look for a tumor or something. And I went in, got the MRI on my brain, and he said, okay, here's the deal. I don't know what this is. I have a theory. I think you're showing signs of MS. Do you know what that is? And then he explained it to me. I'm like, well, okay, well, that sounds bad. He's like, well, it's not great. And he goes, and I'm also not totally sure. So I want to send you to another specialist and see what they think. So he sent me to, I don't know if I should say his name, but he was basically like one of the lead neurologists in the world and in the nation, rather. Sorry. And he was high up there to the point to where he was my doctor for a limited time because he was elevated even higher in the nation. It was really cool. Anyways, he sees me and he agrees that it's probably that. He said, there's one final test we got to do. We got to do a spinal tap. And that's where they have to draw some spinal fluid out of your spine.
That's the big needle that goes way in, right?
Bro, that was a terrible day. That because, well, it was, so the problem, it was painful, but it was far beyond the pain it's supposed to be, right? The nurse or the doctor who did it, was amazing. The nurse was really good too, just fanning me off. And the doctor who did it, she was like very good at this. And she was getting visibly frustrated because there's something weird with my cartilage. I have very, very tough cartilage. And she was having the hardest time getting the needle out of my back. Whoa. So getting the spine The spinal fluid was very tough because you don't want to go in too hard. You could paralyze them.
Yeah.
And she gets in and she's trying to get in there. I remember that needle touching my actual spinal cord, and it felt like my lower half burst by a grenade. It was unbelievable pain because that needle was like bing, like my spinal cord was a guitar string, bing, you know, and
Yeah.
it was incredible.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it was something else. Anyways, long story short, she gets the spinal fluid out. It was supposed to be a 15-minute process. It was 45 minutes of her trying not to break the needle in my spine. And we get the spinal fluid. They confirm it's confirmed. You definitely have MS, and so let's start talking about this. And I was put on a government study because they don't get young people diagnosed very often. And this is the chapter where I started to feel like a weird sort of fraud because I was on Copaxone, which is meant to slow it down, and I was getting a lot of MRIs in the process of this, and it was all covered because it was a study. And I had to go to this clinic and do a bunch of motor skill tests. I aced all of them. I was fine. I was doing fine, right? I remember they would do this thing where it was 60 seconds of this recording giving you single digit numbers, like at an interval of every like 2 seconds. And what you had to do was say the summation of the last two numbers spoken. It was not a rolling sum.
Okay.
So if they said 1, 7, you yell 8. And they say 5, you yell 12. And they yell 2, you say 7,
Okay.
right? And I've always been pretty good with numbers, and I would like constantly crush that test. But the weird thing about it is that I don't know if they're testing on your ability to do it. I think they were testing on your ability to get back on the tracks if you derailed. Because when you derail, it was like I couldn't even understand the numbers anymore. It was crazy. Like I would be correct. And then I'd be like, oh, I got that one wrong. Did I? Oh, what was it? What am I supposed to add that? What's the next one? Like you can't, it's this weird thing, right? So there's all these tests that you would do. But I was among a bunch of people who their test was to walk 3 feet. Their test was to pick up a ball, right? That was their test. And I'm like, I don't belong here. You know what I mean? And I actually had like, and they were all really old people. I remember very, very specifically one woman who had been stricken bad with MS. I mean, you look at what Christina Applegate's going through now.
I was going to say,
right?
like when you think of MS, you think of like a celebrity that you might recognize, like Christina Applegate, and she's gotten hit pretty decently.
Very
with
bad,
it,
yeah. She's got a cane. She has to wear a cane or have a cane with her all the time. And I'm not out of the woods. It could still happen to me, right? But this sweet old lady was like, you are far too young to be here. And that was her, like, she was upset that I was there because it was like, how is it in somebody so young? But at the same time, my test was to see how fast I could walk. You know what I mean? So bottom line is from the get-go, I tried to not let this consume me to the best of my abilities. And sometimes it gets the better of you and sometimes not so much. But I realized, dude, I'm walking, I'm throwing a ball with my daughter still. I'm still able to think, even though I didn't know if it was in my own head, but when they showed me the MRI of my brain, it looked like somebody had taken a Tommy gun to my brain. There are to this day, because it doesn't repair, there are so many dead spots in my brain. And it's become, I mean, I'm getting older, so I'm going to be getting a little bit slower anyways. That's just normal and organic. But this was a little bit accelerated. I started to realize my ability to remember things was dwindling very, very quickly. My ability to focus was dwindling very quickly. But it also, it could also be the fact that I was caring a lot less about the things that are now trivial. They used to be a big deal and they're not so much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like but at the same time, I'm like, I'm not fighting cancer right now. You know what I mean? And that old saying that when something happens to somebody you love, you wish you could take it. Mm-hmm. That was something I used. I was like, if I saw this happening to somebody I love, it would tear me up. I actually, I can handle this. I'm fine. I can handle this. Yeah. You know what I mean? But I would struggle to handle this if it was like one of my kids or something.
Yep.
I wouldn't be able, actually, screw it. I wouldn't be able to handle it, But now it had to happen to somebody. And I very much want it to be me. And it is. And I'm handling it. And it's also mild. So I did the medicine for a long time and fooled myself into thinking I was out of the woods. And I learned, and I want to be very clear here that I don't have any answers on this, But in my own personal experience, I noticed that when I would have a regiment of exercising and eating right, the symptoms would go almost gone. But the second I would eat poorly or get really lazy with my activity, the symptoms, it opens up the window for symptoms to come back in. So that was something I learned, and that was something that I needed to manage, and I could manage better. But many years, so I used to be a smoker when I was younger, and I quit for like 7 years. And then I'm an idiot for this, I started back up like, it must have been 10 years ago. I don't know. For not long, dude. And cigarettes can be a major catalyst to a flare up. And
Did you know that when you restarted, or was this something you found out the hard way?
I think I found out the hard way. There is a chance that in all the literature I read that it mentioned it, and I just didn't retain it. But I don't know. I don't know. But I do know is I know it now, because that was very real, and that was the scariest moment of my life. And I remember because the flare up was I woke up one day and I couldn't, and my hands were curled into balls, and I couldn't open my fingers. I had to use my arms to open my fingers up, and they kept going back. And I didn't know what that was. I'm like, okay, no big deal. I'm just going to go for a walk because my legs were working fine. I'm going for a walk. I'm just going to get the juices flowing. And I was walking. I made it like not even a quarter mile. And I'm like, I got to turn around now because if this gets any worse, I might fall down right on the street here. I don't know. I came back and I woke my wife up, and I was like, listen, I got a real problem here. And I am hiding how vulnerable I was in that moment. Mm-hmm. But I was like, I'm having a relapse. It's very bad. And here's the most incredible part. That morning I woke up, I was so excited because that was the day I was scheduled to get my LASIK, because I've had terrible eyesight my whole life. And I was so excited to get LASIK. And LASIK, for anybody that doesn't know, is an actual surgical procedure to correct your eyes. And it's where they use a laser and they peel your eye open, and it's a real thing. And they actually give you sort of this weird Valium beforehand to calm you down because it's kind of freaky. It's a freaky experience. They put these like ocular things, and they almost push your eyeball out a little bit so they can access. It's a crazy experience, but I was so excited about getting it. I'm like, if this doctor finds out that I'm having a relapse right now, there's not a chance I'm going to be able to get LASIK. I want my LASIK. I'm not rescheduling this. This is how dumb I was. And I went in, I was able to hide it. My wife was very upset with me. I'm like, I'm not rescheduling this. I'm like, I want to do this. And I got the LASIK. I was able to fake my way through it. Jeez. And I sat there and I hid how my hands were all deformed. And I get the LASIK. I come out. Now you have to have your eyes covered for, long, like hours. And when you're done, you can't touch your eyes and all that. Anyways, long story short, I get to the other side of that little stint of LASIK, and it's like less than 24 hours later. And I'm like, we have to go to the hospital. I'm like, I'm in a bad way here. And so we did. And I had this like 7 days of a steroid treatment to get on the other side of it. And the whole time, I've also have these like fresh new eyes I don't get to enjoy and stuff, dude. So frustrating, man. But it doesn't matter. I got to the other side of that, and I was like, what a blessing, because obviously the cigarettes were a big part of that. And obviously I'm never going to smoke again. But here's the deal. I'm not even quitting smoking like the courageous way. That was the easiest quit of my life. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Quit or you die.
Yes. Like that. Yeah. Easy peasy. That was a gift. Oh, I got to the other side. I can use my hands again. Now it's one of the reasons I still drum almost every day, like to keep them loose or whatever. Yeah. But my indicator that I'm not out of the woods is my left hand. At any time, this is always in some weird pain. And it's so hard to explain. Yeah. And when it gets really bad, I do this weird thing where I push in on my fingernails. Now people are going to see it in past podcasts and in future ones. I'll push in real hard. Like, sorry. If you push in on your fingernail really hard, it's almost a little painful. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, it's almost like that. It's in my head, I'm sure, but it like clears the channel to my brain. Like as soon as this hand starts to go painfully numb, I do this, and it's almost like the pain fights its way through the neurons, and it's like, no, we're still a functioning traffic area here. Yeah, you know what I mean?
I can still feel that.
Yeah, I can still do it. Okay. Yeah, it's crazy.
And that relapse was the one that caused the like we were in the middle of filming Naked and Scared. That's the one that caused that.
I'm almost certain
a gap, right?
Yeah, because I can't remember any other relapses.
Because I remember you telling me with that relapse that you're like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do this again.
Yeah.
Like you were worried you would not regain functionality of your hands, and that this career that we were, both trying to go for.
Even the
might
career
be
I was
over for
in
you.
was all keyboard and mouse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was like, that was when my fear of not being able to provide anymore got really bad. Like that's when the fear really took over of not being able, of just being this invalid who can't provide for my family. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, and I started to have those really terrible thoughts where I was just like, if it goes that direction, then I'm just going to get them the life insurance real fast.
I can imagine that kind of puts you in a, like, I don't know, like just the way it must have affected you personally and your outlook on everything. Did you get into like a negative headspace?
Sure.
Or did you stay pretty optimistic through it all?
I tried to stay as optimistic as possible. And I still am. I'm still aware. I mean, dude, I can go I can walk for miles right now. Nothing. I'm
and
like,
this is 20 years.
this is 20 years.
Past the
Yeah.
diagnosis.
And for the record, I want to be very crystal clear about this next part. I do not advocate for the behavior I'm about to share with everybody. I don't advocate for this. I pointed out that proper exercise and proper diet worked for me. You have to find out what your body is sensitive to. It's why I do recommend the Whole30. The Whole30 is a cleanse where you slowly introduce foods back in, and it tells you what you are sensitive to. I know what I'm sensitive to, and I limit that. I limit bread. I don't have a lot of bread. It's my favorite thing in the world. I still eat it like an idiot. I shouldn't have it, but when I get totally clean and I have like bread, just boom, right? So I got to have certain types of bread if I have bread, whatever. Anyways, grains is what I'm saying. But that's me. That's not everybody. For some people, it's going to be dairy. For some people, it's going to be sugar, right? Sugar's also a trigger for me. But anyways, that's why I recommend that. What I don't recommend is what I'm about to tell you is I was on Copaxone for years. Now, Copaxone I was giving myself a shot every single day. I had this big giant, like Sharps container above my fridge. It was like a really large, and I had these pack of needles that were in the fridge. And they at first they give you this gun where you load the gun and then you put it on, you hit a button and it does the whole thing for you. But through time, I was so sick of the gun, I would just grab the needle and just do it myself. And I just got good at it, right? You get good at it. So I was doing it for so long. I filled up that Sharps container, I think a couple times. And then I had a new neurologist and I would say about 8 years ago, he was a good guy, but he was a little bit too rough for me. I believe in bedside manner, right? And he said, I want to get a blood test. And I said, for what? He goes, I want to test your kidneys. And I'm like, for what? And he said, well, you've been on Copaxone for a long time. I want to see what kind of damage it's done to your kidneys. I'm all, well, I didn't know that. What did I miss the memo here? I didn't know I was poisoning myself at the same time. And then I just got really stubborn. And this is the part I don't recommend. I'm like, I'm done. I didn't do a blood test. I didn't do any of that. I'm done. And I just stopped taking medicine altogether. And I think that was I was kind of throwing in the towel, but I think I got lucky because I think it coincided with around the same time that MS for me started to kind of run its course. It does have a capacity to stop causing issues, but you're never fully out of the woods. And my last neurologist, not the guy I just told you about, but a new guy with great bedside manner, wonderful dude. I met with him like a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, if that. And he was very compassionate. He said, you're not taking your meds? And I said, no. And he was like, can I ask why? And I told him why. And I said, I just, when I found out from the last one that it could cause liver damage, and the fact that with proper diet and exercise, I can kind of keep this at bay. I'm aware of how stupid I sound right now. I told him, I said, but that's the reason. He goes, that's kind of difficult to argue with. Mm-hmm. And he goes, and I'm going to be honest with you, that the age you are at, I would be more comfortable if you would get back on the meds. If you were 10 years older than you are right now, and given how functional you are and how long you've had MS, I would be inclined to say you might be out of the woods on this. And he said, I just don't feel that way now. You know what I mean? And he's like, and I have a patient. He goes, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not one of those doctors, but I have a patient your age, same story. And he's a quadriplegic now. And I'm like, oh my God. He goes, yeah, never saw like that, dude. And he goes, it could happen tomorrow, because that's how these flare-ups work, is that when a flare-up happens, basically it's like a bullet hitting you, and it was either a flesh wound or it hit something vital. And that's what this is. And so I was like, well, you're probably right. And then I became jaded. I became really jaded over time. And when I was on the government study, the Copaxone was free for me. But once the government study was over, I went to order it. And this is years ago, by the way, years ago. I mean, we're talking years ago. I went to order it, and it was going to be like $50,000 a year. And I'm all, okay, I guess I'm going to go ahead and die then. I'm not going to pay that. And the lady's like, oh, hold on. She like pushes the button. She's like, okay, it's actually gonna be like $28. I'm all, what just happened? I didn't understand any of what just happened. The system is so wacky. It's so weird to me. But now I want to be very clear here. I am not very educated in this anymore because I got so stubborn so long ago. I don't really know where it stands right now. I do know that a lot of the medication for MS that has been designed, to hold back the effects to the best of its ability. There's Copaxone, there's interferon, there's all these others. They've been what's it called? Not generalized. What's it called when they go generic? Yeah, they've been generic. So now I believe the prices are much more doable. But I do not advocate for the behavior I'm exemplifying here. I'm just saying this is what I did. And I think this is why it's easy for me to be optimistic, because it would be stupid not to, because I've been very, very lucky in all this journey. It's also why I'm like, I know I've seen what an actual disability is. I've seen what it is. Yeah. I have one that it could take me in any moment, but so could driving. You know what I mean? Like everybody does things every day that are risk induced. I have just one other channel of it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. You hear people talking about like a fear of flying, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know that like going for a walk in your neighborhood's like more dangerous than going for a flight on an airplane. You know what I mean? And so it's like, yeah, you got to keep things in perspective. But at the same time, I can only imagine that like knowing that you could have a relapse at any minute and it could send you into something like being a quadriplegic or worse. Like, does that change how you like live? Like, do you take that into consideration as you live through your life and day by day? And like, does it change the way your outlook on life is? Like not taking things for granted, for instance.
Exactly.
Like
not taking things for granted. It's also, I think if I had to sort of psychoanalyze myself on this, I think it's a big part of why I care so little about what people think, because once upon a time I did care. And then I learned what real things are through this journey. And now I like to make content. I like to make people laugh. I like to make them smile and make them think. And if there's people out there who love me, great. If there's people out there who hate me, that's fine too. You know what I mean? But that's why, like, when they try to throw daggers, I'm like, you're wasting. I literally don't care. Like you're throwing daggers at a brick wall.
Yeah.
They're just bouncing off. It means nothing to me. I know it's important to me because now it became so evident to me how limited our time is, that the amount of people whom I care about and whom I care what they think about me is so very, very small that everything else is just a bunch of noise. And it doesn't even qualify as noise anymore. It's just like this dead space. You know what I mean?
Don't have time for that.
I have no time for that. Who cares?
Yeah, because you don't know how much time you have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's scary to think about. What about other impacts? Like you said, okay, so when you have a relapse, it's obvious, right?
Yeah, it's very obvious.
Your fingers and stuff. But is there symptoms on a daily that, like you kind of mentioned, you do the finger thing? I never noticed that before. Now I will.
Yeah.
But like, is there other stuff? You said like your MRI revealed that you have dead spots in your brain. Do you feel like that cognitively affects your day-to-day life? I know we joke, and I sometimes disassociate your MS because you're normal. You know what I mean? You live a really normal life for somebody with MS compared to what I've seen.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I forget about it, and like things like I told Skizz that last week. Why did he ask me that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That happens
a lot.
And a lot of times I just think, oh, it's forgetful Skizz. You know what I mean? Like I just put it past you as that's part of your personality. That's part of who you are. You're just a forgetful person.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's due to your MS, or
sometimes I think I'm also have the capacity to be just a genuinely forgetful person. I think that's I don't want to blame MS for so this is something I do with my brothers all the time. When we got past the shock and awe of the fact that I've now been diagnosed, I made this joke of it to where I would just blame everything on it. So like we'd be like hanging out and I knock over like a can of soda. I'm like, MS. And they were just like, dude, and I would do whatever sometimes I would just do things on purpose as a jerk. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, MS. You know what I mean? I would just like do this. And it was like this joke I'd make. But however, in terms of the reality of it, I think that sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And I think that my forgetfulness, I don't know if that's associated. I think it very well could be. But what I am definitely seeing, and it's really, I'll tell you this, it's really starting to piss me off, is sometimes my ability to logic things through starts to fall apart. And that's very frustrating for me, is that I'll be like, I'll go to like figure something out. I wish I could come up with an example, but I'll go to like figure something out. And as I'm trying to work it through, I can see all the pieces. But what's worse is I can also see how old Skizz would have seen these pieces and done this. Instantly had the answer. Instantly. And I can see the pieces. I have the memory that seeing the pieces was all I used to need. But now I'm sitting there trying to like will my way into putting the pieces together. That is maddening. That is so frustrating. And that is something where I'm just like, okay, just calm down, breathe. You have to be at peace with the fact that this is going to take you longer than it used to. And I slow my mind down and I just piece by piece put together. If I had an example, this would make more sense, but I'm trying to, okay, actually this might be a kind of a good example. This could be good. It's not really a logic thing, but it's sort of along the same lines. If I wanted to go to a new location in the past, I'd bring up Google Maps, and I would look at it one time and I'd be like, okay, just get off on this, turn right. Cause take the 10 to the 202. We're going to shoot this, get off on it. And then what was that? The second left. And then it'll be a little U-turn. The house would be on the left. Okay. And that was it. And I would go do it. Now, dude, I look at that and I get on the freeway. I'm like, which freeway do I? Okay, that one, right? Yeah, okay, driving. Yeah, okay, yeah. And then I get on the freeway. I'm like, okay, and I'm supposed to turn. I get off on, what was it? And I find myself like, I'm not going to look. I can figure this out. You know what I mean? And then I'm like, I'm going to miss the exit. What is it? Oh, that's right. Like that is very, very frustrating. So I get. I don't want to say chastised, but I get playfully attacked a lot online for having ADHD, and I think that there's a degree of that there, but a lot of it also is because my brain's like, I'm running out of synapses here, man. A lot of them are dead. I can't hold on to all this stuff. So
your thoughts go down a path and then hit lack of a better term, dead end.
They hit a dead end,
like literally maybe a dead spot.
Yeah,
and then have to navigate around.
Who knows?
I could see that. Like, it's been a challenge because. Like, it must be a challenge figuring out what is due to the MS and what is due to just natural aging,
old age,
just the way you are, things like that. Because like our content from the get-go has been banter, right?
Yeah,
and it's been a lot of goofy Skizz and Impulse, the guy that has to be perfect at everything, kind of giving Skizz a hard time. Get in the boat!
Yeah.
Get in the boat! How could you not just click on the button? Get in the boat, Skizz! You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of that, and and that's been kind of our shtick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Better not change.
Well, at the same time, like, now I'm starting to feel bad. Like, maybe he couldn't get in the boat because he had a flare-up.
No.
You know
I would love to blame that. I should have right that MS, dude.
Yeah, you could have busted that one out, but like... Yeah, it becomes a point to where I'm like I'm worried I'm gonna start second guessing whether or not that's okay. Like, is it okay to give you a hard time about forgetting something that I had already told you or whatever?
The answer is yes.
I mean?
The answer is yes, because I already know you would never willfully try to like hurt my feelings or whatever. If you want to hurt my feelings, you can go ahead and stop treating me normal. You know what I mean? Like that you can do that. If you want to hurt my feelings, go ahead and treat me like you need to put a cork on my fork. You know, I don't want you doing that. I want you just like...
I think that's why I used the word vulnerable when we started this podcast, was because I felt like this was something you didn't like to talk about too much because you were worried that people would see you in a different light. And the fact that you're even willing to do this conversation, this podcast, could lead to that direction that you don't want to happen, right? But I think
Yeah.
being upfront about that and saying like, don't change, like you're still okay with me jabbing you.
Yeah, I'm fine with it, dude.
know?
I'm fine with it because I'll be honest with you too. Like I said, I've seen what MS does. You've seen what it does,
Yeah.
and I'm as far as MS people go, I'm as lucky as it gets. That is not fun, playful wordplay. That is real. I feel legitimately, woo, lucky me. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
this could have been really bad. And yeah, sure, it still can, but so can anybody who's in a car ride today. So I don't, I don't wake up like, oh, woe is me. I'm not going to do what that's going to, and you know what? If it took my legs, I probably would do that. I'll be honest with you. I probably would wallow and be a mess. I don't know. I really don't know. And I hope I don't ever have to know. I just know that it sucks having a disease that is uncurable and unknowable. And it's just such a mystery. That sucks. It sucks knowing at any given time it could take me. I've had other moments. I mean, I did have another flare up. You know what I think, dude? I don't think it was the time I was in the hospital that slowed down Naked and Scared. I think it was when I had to spend a week on the couch because of my vertigo. I remember that took me out of work for a week. I remember this, dude. God, it's coming back to me now. It makes me wonder if there's been others I don't remember, but all of a sudden, it wasn't like if my eyes were open and my head moved at all, it was like the world was spinning on its axis. And it was the most nauseating week of my life, dude. I remember laying on the couch and just like so frustrated, just like I need to sit up, but I can't sit up without having to fight back the urge to puke. That's what having a vertigo attack is. And that was a week long, dude. Or like 5 days. And I was just like, this is the absolute worst. Just like I literally have to go like a week with zero stimulus to get through this vertigo. And I got to the other side and I was fine. I haven't had that again. You know what I mean? But I had to be very careful. They say a lot of people in Arizona who get MS have to move because this heat is very, very dangerous. Heat's a very bad one. I got MS, and a couple years later, I was hiking the Grand Canyon, and I was at the bottom.
Crazy.
Yeah, and it was like one of those things. I was like, this could be certain death down here for people like me. I don't care. I'm healthy-ish. I'm gonna live my life. This is what I'm gonna do. And it was also very reckless. Again, I don't advocate for this, but I do remember one moment. At the bottom, there's a place called, they call it the Hot Box. We were doing this crazy hike at the bottom of the canyon. We were living in Phantom Ranch at the bottom, and we were going to make this 14-mile round trip hike to Ribbon Falls. And part of the hike is where they call the Hot Box, and I believe it's like 3/4 to maybe a straight quarter of a quarter mile, 3/4 of a mile to a straight mile. Zero shade. And it's one of those like, this is something you have to prepare for, because the bottom of the canyon, people don't realize this. They think you go to the Grand Canyon and it goes down. That's not what the Grand Canyon is. You go to the Grand Canyon, you go up to the top. When you get to the bottom, that elevation is what you and I are at right now. So it's like, it's not like it's like, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
it can get very hot. And, so I'm down there because the higher you go, the colder it is. That's why the snow's up there, not down there. So I see this Hot Box, and that was probably maybe the first time I was starting to get really afraid, because I'm like, if heat's going to do my like kick start a flare up, it's here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was in some shade before we got started, and I just got a bunch of water on me, and I was hydrated. I felt good. And I'm like, I'm not going to run through this thing. Obviously, I'm going to walk quickly, and I'm not stopping until I'm on the other side. And I was with people, and they're like, you ready? I'm like, I'm ready. And we just went, and we just got to the other side, and I was fine, man. I was fine. I got lucky again, but I just kept living my life, and I have no interest in, wallowing. And like I said, if it ever gets worse, you might see a different Skizz.
I was going to challenge that, actually, because I could see, like, let's say you woke up tomorrow and you lost use of your legs.
Mm-hmm.
I could see you being upset
Of
for a
course,
while,
of
but
course.
I also could see you flipping again and being like, it could be worse. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
Like, because when you got diagnosed, you kind of went through the same thing. Upset at first a little bit and about being in this position, but now look at you. You got a very positive outlook, and you're grateful for what you do have. And I think that's a good lesson for anybody that's going through, a multitude of things.
Yeah.
I mean, MS is just one disease. There's so many out there, and there's more than just diseases that impact people in negative ways. So having an outlook on your situation to where you can be like, yes, this sucks, but at least I still have this. I mean, find something to kind of latch onto to be grateful for, no matter where you are. Like even if we talked about Christina Applegate. And I don't know the extreme of her condition of where she's at currently, but I've seen her and seen what she's gone through, and that must have been super frustrating because I'm sure she can't do what she wants to do.
Right.
She was a great actress, and is she able to still land the same roles or even do it at all? It's probably very much hindering her, which would be very frustrating. But I'm sure she's grateful to not be worse.
Yeah.
And things like that. And that's kind of how you've been living so far. You drum because you're grateful that you still have.
Yeah, I
this in
still
your hands,
can. I can still do it. Yeah.
And so I think that's a really good outlook. And I can imagine if things do take a turn for the worse, that you would still find that kind of silver lining. Yeah, you dealt a bad hand. But it's not gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I hope I never have to find out because I think that there's limits to. I'm just gonna say I hope you're right. And I also hope that we never find out. I have to hope those things, because
you have a good support system too. Like your family, obviously big support. Like how do they handle all that?
Oh,
if you don't mind me asking.
Yeah. Everybody wanted to just be there as much as they could and offer whatever kind of help they could offer. My wife is she's just an amazing rock and always has been. My mom, the hardest person to tell was actually my mom, and she handled it really well because she used to be in the nursing field and stuff like that. And she was very proactive and trying to help. My brothers were super helpful. All of them, were very helpful in regards to whatever, they thought I needed at that time or whatever. So they were super supportive. And that's really all I can say about that. Like they were just very, very helpful. I remember telling I remember when my friends and I went out, we went out to get a beer. So I was 25 and I'd been recently diagnosed and we hadn't caught up. This is the guys I do the guys trip with. I've been friends with since, 4th grade. And we went to this bar and we were just hanging, catching up and having a good old time and laughing. And it'd been a while. I'm all, okay, now the bad news. And they were just like, what? And so I told them, and a couple of them weren't super familiar with MS, but one was very familiar because within the last year, I believe he had lost an uncle to it.
Oh, wow.
And so he was a little shooken up. But it was fine. And they still, even today, they'll ask me when we're going on trips, like, how's everything going with that? I'm like, it's going great. Like, I'm fine. You know what I mean? I'm fine. I'm good.
That's good, man. Yeah. I can see why you feel lucky because
very lucky.
20 plus years not knowing, like every day, not knowing if this is the day you're going to get hit and taken out from, being able to use any of your extremities or worse. Yeah. Has to be, but you've managed to not live in fear. It seems like you don't wake up and that's the first thing you think of is today the day.
Right.
That
I believe that.
My ability to use my hands,
Right. I believe that. And I have to, I've even asked myself, am I in some sort of weird denial right now? Is that why I pretend it's all okay? No. And then I realized, no, I'm actually legitimately a lucky person. Legitimately. I have the greatest wife in the world. I have the greatest kids in the world. I have the greatest friends in the world. The most incredible opportunity to do what we do, doing this show, doing the YouTube stuff, doing, Minecraft and the live series and the streaming with the amazing community. I got nothing to complain about, man. Nothing. I got nothing. I am good to go.
I love that, man. Yeah. That's a really good outlook. I think, when we talked about whether or not to do this podcast and talk about this, I was a little nervous that it was going to be kind of a downer, like a negative thing. Yeah. People would worry about you and stuff like that. But then at the same time, I'm like, I think this is worth talking about because of that energy right there, because that's what the world needs more of. That's what people need to hear, because a lot of people are going through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you have found a way with the cards you've been dealt to find that silver lining, to wake up feeling grateful. And if everybody can do that, no matter what situation they're in, then they're going to have a better life. We're going to live in a better world. You know? So that's worth putting out into the ether. As much as this was probably a weird and difficult conversation to have, but you said you were good.
I'm good.
So thanks for being honest about it. It's something, like I said, I'm hanging out with you all the time. I'm with you all the time, and it hardly ever crosses my mind.
Yeah.
Like I just like you have dealt with it so well, and you aren't really having like super bad symptoms because you know you're lucky that I haven't had to think about it. And people around you probably are the same way. I mean, I can't imagine your wife even thinks about it that much.
No,
you know,
no, we're good. We're good. I've got stairs in my house.
yeah.
You know what I mean? I have stairs in my house, and I don't have a. I mean, we were building a house when I got diagnosed, and my wife's like, we need to make sure that there's a shower downstairs. And I'm like, we don't need a shower downstairs. And it caused kind of an issue. She was right. She was logical.
Mhm.
I think that there was some denial in my mind. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I'm fine. But she was very realistic. She's like, you don't know. And in the back of my mind at the time, I'm like, you don't seem to understand. If that's a problem, it won't be a problem for you. You know what I mean? As in, I'm done. You know what I mean? I'm not like I was in this weird space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was kind of a weird place to be, but got through it, like I said, because I'm very, very lucky. But I have stairs in my house today that I use just fine. I'm kind of sick of going up and down them all day. But a part of me is like, no, actually, this is kind of good. Like when I'm at the gym, when I'm at Orange Theory running, the other day I ran for the first time in a long time. I ran for 12 straight minutes, nonstop, no breaks. It was a benchmark we were doing. And the whole time I'm running, I'm exhausted, but I'm like, dude, you get to run, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you get to run. And I remember looking in the mirror being like, if you complain about this one more time, I'm going to punch you, you know?
Yeah. Do you remember the guy from our gym that had
Yes,
lost
I do.
He lost use of his legs because he got in what happened? He
I don't
He
know.
flipped into a ball pit or something, right?
Oh, that's somebody else. You're not talking about the guy in the wheelchair. Or
yeah, it was.
yeah, no, you're
I
talking
remember-
about Danny.
Yes, no, I'm talking about Danny. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Danny was never in a wheelchair though. Danny was
He lost use of his legs though.
he was supposed to have. This is a great story, Impulse. Danny, you know what? I made a music video on this guy too, and I wish I could show it, but I can't because it leads too much back to us very, very personally. Danny flipped into a ball pit, broke his back, and was told you'll never walk again. And that's when our trainer was like, well, we'll see about that, because something about the thing was that it's not a complete spinal snap. That is, I don't remember the verbiage for it, but it had been bent so severely that he lost use of his legs. But there was a little bit there to work with. And our trainer did some weird stuff with him and got him the use back in his legs. And we went and did the 1,200 meter run, which is like
a mile,
4
isn't
football fields. Huh?
Is that about a mile? No, a mile's 1,600 in it.
Yeah. So it's
Anyway,
like,
almost a
whatever.
mile.
It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like a 1,200 meter run. We did it during Christmas and the whole gym did it. Remember
Yep.
that, dude?
Yeah.
And we had
And
shirts
we
made
had the
up.
shirts. That's why I brought it up, because the saying on the back of his shirt
Yes, thank you.
was, I never wanted to run until I couldn't.
Until I couldn't walk. I never wanted to run until I couldn't walk. Yeah.
Which is always, yeah. I mean, that's the same line of thinking that like we're talking
What
about.
are my goosebumps,
Yeah.
bro?
Yeah, because like that was him, just like, you got to be grateful
Yes.
for what you have. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And he realized like, oh, all that time he spent in his life, like not wanting to run because I guess, laziness, I'll air quote that. But then he lost the use of his legs and he's like, God, I wish I'm not only run, I just want to walk again.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And he did it.
He did it.
That guy did it.
Yeah.
He was at the gym every day. He was like, was he doing pull-ups in like
That's the other guy.
That's the other guy in the wheelchair,
He was like
yeah.
a carpenter. There's another one, right?
There
This
was
guy.
another one. Yeah, coming in the gym in a wheelchair and doing pull-ups in his wheelchair.
Yeah. And the guy he was like Joe Swanson from Family Guy. He was jacked. But it was more than that, dude. He's in a wheelchair and he's a super nice guy and he comes in, he works out with us, and that's all well and good. I want to be honest here. He's in a wheelchair and my brain is like, I love this guy. He's a nice guy. Like, but my brain is like, he's in a wheelchair, so he's going to be limited, which is true. But he was so far less limited than I gave him credit for. And here's an example. We remember were you there the day we installed the pull-up bars?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we went in there to install these pull-up bars, massive set of pull-up bars that were
like
not
a
only
rig.
installed, a rig.
The
It was a
whole
rig
rig, yeah.
that was not only in the ground but also up against the wall, and it had places for like gymnastics rings. I mean, it was a very big job.
nice.
I set up, and I was not allowed to help because I had just had shoulder surgery, but I wanted to be a part of it somehow. So I came in, I did a time-lapse video of the whole thing. I made a music video out of it. Today I don't feel like doing anything. And I played that song, and then it was all of us in fast motion, and the whole thing coming together. Well, that dude was pivotal because he was a carpenter and a very talented one. So in regards to the tools and the know-how to drill into the building's foundation, he had all that knowledge. I had none. And he was cutting picture-perfect circles in the rubber mat that was the flooring, drilling deep into the ground and he wasn't helpful. We couldn't do it without him. You know what I mean? Then we had a Christmas party, and I'm embarrassed to dance at parties. He's out there in a wheelchair cutting a rug, dude. You want to talk about a positive? That guy's like my hero, dude.
Yeah.
It was, I remember being like, dude, this guy makes me literally want to commit to never complaining about anything ever again.
Right.
He was just so, I forget his name, which makes me so mad.
Yeah, me too. I don't remember his name. And yeah, I do remember now the difference between what Danny was doing. Because Danny was working on like doing calf raises and things like that to get motion back.
Yeah.
And he was the other guy was in a full blown wheelchair, but
it was never.
It's just like, it's just so inspiring to see.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying is inspiring what you're doing, like what you've gone through and how you've like mentally overcome it and created that silver lining and really valuing everything, valuing the fact that you can still use your hands and drum, valuing every moment, making content while you still can, because you never know when it's going to end. And it's like, you can see that, you can feel that in what you do, like, because all that's poured into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, that makes me more grateful for every time I do a collab with you, because you never know.
You never know.
And that's the same way with, like you said, we could go to ship a package, and get in a car wreck and both be taken out. Like, that's everybody, That's correct. But this is just another added thing that you have to think about. So, oh man, that's amazing, dude. I think I'm glad we did this. I think hopefully it inspires people. It's inspired me to.
Well, I got that similar vibe from Scar when we had Scar on. Scar's another one whom I hold in extraordinarily high regard, because we get to work very closely with him. We're aware that he's confined to a wheelchair. We're aware that his wheelchair has nothing to do with any sort of form of negligence. This was just piss poor bad luck. He had the worst luck ever in regards to the condition that he was stricken with at such a young age. And he is always lovely. Yep. Let's just call it, let me do this. Let me do this. You and I work with a lot of people, and I love every single one of them. And every single one of us has had our moments where we might be not the most pleasant to work with. We're just going to say it like that, loosely like that. Except for Scar. He has been perpetually pleasant,
Beacon.
100% of the time. And honestly, I mean, well, and Etho and B-Dubs, like, those guys are wonderful. They're so wonderful. But he has been so pleasant, overly pleasant, 100% of the time, without question, that I find myself being so angry about his situation, much more than he seems to be. But we had him on the podcast, and he's like, "This is who I am," and I'm like, "Who you are is better than almost everybody I know."
Yeah.
Like, he's the best. He's the absolute best.
Yeah. Like I said, I said he's a beacon. He's a beacon of light. Like, he's a good reminder of, like, somebody that can overcome. Like, just again, taking something that a lot of people could just wallow and disappear into nothingness, and instead he's turned it into a positive. Yeah. And he keeps a positive outlook on everything. It's like, it's amazing. It's super inspiring to see somebody like him. Yeah. That was great having him on the show. Now I want to go back and watch that podcast with him again.
That, and I want to have him back on too for something. Like, I want to have, I'll tell you, I just did a cooking stream with my wife, with Mrs. Skizz, if you will. Actually, she's going to have a different name if she does anything like this. And
please tell me it's Princess Consuela Banana Hammock. That's got to be your name.
No, it's not. No, that's from Friends. Okay, well, you can call me Crap Bag. With Paul Rudd. Yeah. No, just think of a bag of crap. That's what he says. Yeah. Anyways, no. Her and I did a cooking stream. Scar chimed in, and then they started talking about Star Wars. I lost her. And I was like,
that's so funny.
I married Scar.
That was
like
so
she
funny.
just couldn't stop talking about
you
Star
kept
Wars.
trying to change subjects and talk about something else, and she just kept. Nope, she was not getting derailed, dude. She was not. It was like Scar. Yeah.
It was really funny, dude. It was wonderful, but it's also like, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I'd like to have him back on, and maybe it's for. I'd be fine talking about Star Wars. I would love to maybe even bring my wife on.
I'd be fine listening to people talk about Star Wars. I don't have anything to add myself, really.
I know, me neither. I mean, I like Star Wars very much.
Same, but not a fanatic.
I'm not.
Right?
I'm not.
Yeah.
I wish I was, because there's a lot of things they talk about. I'm like,
Kind of just like whoosh over the head.
Yeah. But there's cool stuff. We're not going to talk about it. We're not talking about it right now. Clone Wars.
If we brought Scar on for a Star Wars talk, like that would be the longest podcast. Like we might have to break it up into 10 parts. First time.
I wouldn't have to cut at all. It would just be on him the whole time.
That'd be the easiest edit.
Easiest edit.
Oh man. Well, hopefully we get a chance to do that. I mean, that's been something we've talked about. You know, obviously, last podcast, if everything went well, we're recording this. We're all out of order on our podcast recordings, if we're honest.
This is how we're. Yeah.
But last podcast should have been a guest. That was outside of our normal realm. And that's something that we talked about in episode 100 or whatever. Like, I think, and in one of our milestones, our 2-year milestone, we talked about what we want to do moving forward.
Having
with the podcast.
non-celebrity specialists on.
Yeah, having more specialists on the podcast. And if everything went well, then that happened last week.
Yeah.
And that's something we want, even if we take our previous guests and kind of bring them in as specialists on some certain things. Like Star Wars and Scar.
Yeah.
That could be fun to do in the future. I want to do more of that kind of stuff. So
that could be really, really cool.
Yeah. So we'll see where it goes. But hey, this was a great talk. Thanks for opening up, and I learned more about what you went through. You know, even though we are always together, like it's a good reminder as well.
Yeah.
That this whole thing has happened and how you've dealt with it. So thanks for sharing.
My pleasure, man. And hey, it is important that this is not intended to trivialize anything that you guys are going through, right? There's one of you listening or watching right now has been stricken with something. And if you're wallowing, that you're human, but you need to set a statute of limitations on how long you're going to allow it to drive you. Also, again, one of you out there is listening who has a severe case of MS. And I definitely don't mean to downplay that at all. I'm very, very honest when I say how very lucky I am. But just, you can't, my take on this whole thing is you can't let it drive you. If I woke up every day wallowing in the fact that I was stricken with this disease, I don't know how much longer I would make it. What I do know is I'm instantly dead because I'm not living anyways. Right. But again, cannot express how lucky I've been, cannot say that enough times. So that's how I genuinely feel.
And we're all lucky to have you still creating for us. So
you stop it.
All right, before I fill his head too much, we're going to end this one. Thanks, guys, for hanging out.
Yep.
And hopefully we'll see some of you on the pre-show on Patreon. We've been growing more and more over there, so check the description. There's a link for our Patreon, help support the show, and then also allows you guys to come in and do the pre-show with us, which is super fun.
Yep.
So, all right, with that said, we'll see you guys.
See ya.
Bye.